Question number 32 on the reading portion of College Board's Test 5. Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from main focus questions. We have to zoom out, think big picture. Don't get trapped in the weeds of the problem. Don't remember a particular little thing that you recall, and then have that be the basis of understanding for the entire passage. That's a big, easy way to screw up a question like this. And the test maker wants you to do that. They construct the answers for these questions with the purpose of getting you to remember a tiny little detail about the passage and then believing that that's what the whole thing was about. Or like they said it once and then therefore that's what the passage was about. Zoom out a little bit, 40,000 foot view of the problem. What exactly did we just read? Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from a discussion of an experiment and its results to, so what did we talk about? We talk about the experiment. We just talk about the experiment and then we talk about the results. And what happens? 2, an explanation of the practical application of the results. Maybe you can argue that this last sentence, 85 to 86, was the practical application of the result, but realize again, the practical application means like, okay, so what can we do with this information? What allows us to do something in reality with this information? And that's not what this passage is talking about. This passage is talking about not like, will they be able to boost their ratings? Will they be able to use this information and do something about it? We're not talking about that at all. There's no practical applications of the results. We're not saying like, and now we can do this. I'm not liking this idea that we're talking about practical applications. What about B? Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from a discussion of an experiment and its results to a consideration of the questions prompted by the results. This seems like a really vague answer, like to the point where I don't understand what it's saying. And I just always want you guys to embrace that feeling. Whenever you read a question and you're like, what? I don't even know what that said. Good, that's good. Embrace that feeling and try to discover and understand why you felt that way and what the question is saying, instead of just writing it off immediately. It's maybe one of the biggest things that if I could tell you guys, is that would avoid probably, for even the smartest people, 75% of their errors. A consideration of the question. So we've talked about the experiment and the results to a consideration of the questions prompted by the results. That might be true, because if we remember, look, what are the questions? So remember, the experiment was talked about here, and then the results were talked about here. But what does Aral say? He says, he wonders, he's like, our experiment does not reveal the psychology, line 66, behind people's decisions, but an intuitive explanation is that people are more skeptical of negative social influence. He's like now coming up with understanding, like, why did this happen? Duncan Watt says, there's one question. Why is the herding bias specific to the site or true in general? What's the deal with this? And then finally, what explains the difference? And then finally, he says, or maybe the question is posed at the end more broadly, will companies be able to boost their products by manipulating online ratings on a large scale? Aren't these questions prompted by the results? We know that people are herd-like. Let's consider now the ramifications of this thing that we know to be true now. All we're doing is testing the Leitch hypothesis and determine how this affects other people. And they wanted to know also, if we look at line 42, this time he wanted to know how much the crowd influences the individual. And these are things we want to understand. We kind of had this assumption and knowledge based on the movie result that this guy did, that people are able to be herded into believing something or be manipulated. He wanted to know, more particularly, how much the crowd influences the individual, which we did with this massive news aggregation website. So I like when we think big picture, B hits on a lot of points that are true. So I'm liking B. I like that it's broad. I like that we're talking about big pieces of the passage and not just tiny little sentences. What about C? Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from a discussion of an experiment and its results to an analysis of the defects undermining the results. Are there any defects to this thing undermining the results? This would be if you understood Duncan Watts at the end and you think that he's just poo-pooing this guy's research. He's not. He's not analyzing the defects. He's not like, well, here are the problems of this experiment, and this is why it undermines the results. Because realize he agrees with the conclusion. So even though you might argue it's like, is he analyzing the defects? He maybe brings up a defect, or it's not even a defect. A defect is like a problem with the study. He is, I think, bringing up more generally just he wants to better understand a particular result. Why is it that one type of story got a 50% stronger boost than another? So he's maybe not necessarily analyzing defects and realizing and saying these undermine the results of the study, because according to line 73, he agrees with the conclusion of the study. And furthermore, I don't like the fact that we're getting in the weeds with C. So if you pick C and you're thinking about it from Duncan Watts' perspective, we're getting too much in the weeds. Why do we only care about this guy? We want to talk about, more broadly speaking, what the passage was about, what the results were, what those results have brought us to believe now, and what are new questions that we can try to answer as a result of these new findings. The final part of the story you have to ask yourself is not an analysis of the defects. We're not talking about, here's the laundry list of all the problems with this experiment. Don't, again, get lost in the weeds when you need to be focusing from a 40,000 foot perspective, roughly what was happening. And we can't say that it has anything to do, that the second part of this thing was just trashing the experiment, talking about all the defects and why it was wrong. We're not doing that. We're just providing some, valid questions to be raised in order to better understand the results. So C, I understand if you picked it, but realize again why you got trapped by thinking of a tiny little thing that you remember in the story instead of thinking thematically, overall, big picture, what's going on? And we're not analyzing defects. What about D? Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from a discussion of an experiment and its results to a conversation with a scientist who disputes the results. This is also a good bad answer. They want you to remember a particular aspect of the story, but remember, he agrees with the conclusion, line 73 to 74. So he's not disputing the results. He agrees with it. He just has some questions, and he doesn't know the answers to as to why maybe some results were a little bit weird or different or unexpected. But nowhere does he say that he disputes the findings. Good bad answer by the College Board. Good job. Same thing with C. An explanation of there's no practical applications. The answer is going to be B. That was the answer that certainly made me feel uncomfortable when I read it. I had to read it twice to understand exactly what it was talking about. And again, that's the name of the game. The College Board wants to make right answers look wrong and wrong answers look right. In this case, they want to make the right answer look wrong. They did it in B. They did a good job. The answer 32 is going to be B.